Just been out for a manicure. Are they looking all right?
Suffering for your art, some might say, because you were playing last night and you had a bit of difficulty.
Yeah, I was DJing last night at a Halloween party, and I was dressed as Freddy Krueger, so I had these on. So there was lots of using my left hand to do the controls and do whatever. But I was saying to someone that Freddy Krueger, fortunately, was clever enough to leave the thumb
unclawed. Yeah.
I was talking to someone that actually meant, it probably meant he could like turn a light on and do different things. So, yeah.
That's the thing you obviously didn't think of before, though, was, turning light switches on and maybe operating the microwave or, other bits and pieces around the house. Quite difficult.
Yeah. Because I'd also think, considering this is just really for slashing, I think if you're left-handed, it's probably quite easy just to slash with your left hand. I mean, it's not. If you think about all the things you do with your right hand, or maybe Freddy Krueger was left-handed, so he did all his other things with.
Exactly, yeah, because I would imagine quite difficult when you're going to the loo as well.
Yeah, Freddy Krueger's like a dream thing, so he can do what he wants. And I was like, oh no, he wasn't originally. When he first had the gloves, he was just a serial killer, wasn't he? So anyway, could talk about this all day, but I think we've got some horror films to talk about.
I know, yeah. Thank you for reminding me. We're talking about Mandrake today, which is on Shudder. It's a moody folk horror directed by Lynne Davison. I think she had a film at the Flare Festival, BFI Flare Festival, the LGBTQ plus film festival back in 2011. This is, an interesting one. How would you sum up the story? Because it's kind of twisting and turning all the way through, and you're kind of expecting more to happen. Well, I was expecting more to happen, but do you want to talk about the story?
So it starts, sort of the protagonist is a probation officer who gets assigned, female probation officer who gets assigned to monitor and keep an eye on a middle-aged woman who's just been released from prison after murdering her husband many years ago in quite odd circumstances, and it became quite a famous kind of almost like serial killer type case. So there's a lot of, she's kind of almost a known figure, like the kids refer to her as the sort of like boogeyman witch type character, and now she's come back to her rural cottage and the protagonist has to keep an eye on her. But there was lots of stuff around her motivation to do, at the time, people thinking it was to do with rituals and witchcraft and different things. So it kind of has that sort of social realist start where it's just kind of like actually someone who's been in prison for a long time, who may have been a perpetrator or may have been a victim, and how the community responds to her. And then this probation officer's got this role to play, obviously keeping an eye on her, but also, in a way keeping her safe from other people. So it's an interesting setup.
Yeah, she's Bloody Mary. Well, that's what they call her, isn't it? Bloody Mary Laidlaw. She's played by Derbhle Crotty. The probation officer, she's played by Deidre Mullins. She reminded me of... Do you remember Censor? Did you see Censor with Niamh Algar? She reminded me of that Irish actress.
No.
I thought she was really good. I thought the performance she gave was good.
I think it was very atmospheric. I think it was creepy. It was disturbing. And I think it was definitely something a bit different. I also think it's one of those things where, it's working on various different levels. And it's like, is there a real crime going on? Or is there a supernatural thing going on? Or is it a sort of people who have a belief system, therefore they're doing things thinking they're supernatural, they're not. And it actually unfolds in quite an interesting way. And I think it doesn't hold its cards too close to its chest for too long, which I think is quite interesting. And it also then brings up some thematic links between the two different women and kind of the sort of sense of motherhood and kind of wanting to be a parent. Because one of the main issues with Bloody Mary, as she's known, is that she had a baby, I believe, in prison that was taken into care. So I think it's very interesting.
Yeah, I agree, because I think it's certainly less predictable than you would expect it to be. I mean, if you've watched the trailer, you'll see it does have that kind of mood about it and makes you think that it's that kind of atmospheric folk horror type film. It was more kind of story-led as opposed to just kind of jump scares and that kind of horror film.
Yeah, and the stakes are quite high, and something quite bad happens fairly early on. There's a sort of disappearance that then is actually resolved quite quickly and in quite a surprising way, actually, not how I thought it would be, which gives the film quite a brutal edge, I think. It's kind of not, it's not very merciful towards its characters. which, you know, I think for a good horror, that's okay.
It's not apologetic, is it? It's not an apologetic horror movie. It does go there. But yeah, that was probably, you know, I wasn't expecting that so much.
I mean, I would say for anyone who watches it, I think you have to concentrate a lot. There's quite a few details that are relayed about what happened in the past in kind of quick conversations. Possibly for me at the end, the ending was a little opaque about what had kind of happened to certain characters. But yeah, overall it was good. Yeah. Should we talk about mandrakes? People may be familiar with mandrakes from the Harry Potter series, where I think there's a class where they have to teach how to unroot them. It's kind of like a mythical. Well, actually, no, a mandrake isn't a mythical thing. It's an actual root. It's a thing that and it was traditionally used. People thought it had fertility properties and actually would give quite hallucinogenic effects if ingested. So there were lots of rituals around it to do with kind of like spring and fertility and people getting pregnant and whatever. But then certain legends of it had it where it was actually a creature that when you pull it out of the ground, it shrieks, and it shrieks. The shriek is so awful that it kills anybody around it. So that's a kind of sort of concept within this. So I quite like that as well.
Yeah, it's quite chilling, isn't it?
It doesn't mean it might border. I think in other hands, I think this is a really capable director. I think in other hands, it might border on silly, that thing. Particularly if you think about those mandrakes in the Harry Potter series as being kind of basically grumpy little babies that you pull out of the ground. It's an odd thought, isn't it?
It's not done in a silly way, though, is it? It's quite intellectual. I mean, the story as well is quite clever. And Matt Harvey wrote the screenplay. I think he's obviously thought about the direction for where the characters are going.
And I think, we talk about this quite a lot in horror. Kind of like I like films where they're not afraid to show what's going on with the horror, and some stuff that might seem fantastical is then presented in quite a normal way, and it's a bit like, oh yeah. So I think I liked it. I imagine it's a fairly low budget production. It's not flashy, but it's like I thought it was very atmospheric. Yeah, and I say it's worth watching.
Yeah, and we've talked about low budget films before that do have that impact. You know, they're low budget, but they still don't feel low budget. It's quite clever what they do with it. It's not like it doesn't seem cheap by any means. There's a lot of thought gone into it. I think your explanation though does give people the idea of what kind of horror film it is, and if that's not really your thing, if you're more kind of like into stabby stuff and more aggressive violence, it's not necessarily that kind of horror.
In some ways it's a bit of a slow burner with a few nasty shocks. I definitely think, you know, the setting of being in Ireland as well gives it that sort of folk
authenticity.
Kind of
saying that though, the Northern Irish accents did. I couldn't really hear a lot of the dialogue. They were so authentic, the way they were having these conversations, almost like they were mumbling a little bit, and
and that's what I'm saying about Constant, because there was one bit where I don't think a former police officer, I think a serving police officer, but who was around when the murders happened, is explaining some things, and I had to kind of stop it and rewind it just because of he spoke quite quickly and in a very thick accent. There's a really good Irish horror film, I think, on Netflix called You're Not My Mother, sort of set on an estate and about a girl whose mum has kind of mental health issues and then goes missing and comes back, and she starts to think that she's not actually her mum, that she's kind of
that
like...
That sounds familiar, or maybe I'm thinking of EastEnders. You're not my mother.
You're not my mother. Yes, I am. Well, didn't they do that? They did that awful sort of little spin-off of EastEnders, didn't they, where they went to Ireland for a... Cat and Alfie went to Ireland. So maybe that's it. Maybe it's all about Cat Slater. Maybe she's the evil witch behind it all.
Yeah, they should release a horror film actually titled "You're Not My Mother," but Mother instead of Mother.
Yes, I am.
Getting the ideas in. So it's Mandrake. Yeah, it's a strong 3 for me. I enjoyed it. I don't know. Maybe I wasn't in the mood for that kind of style of horror film, but I do like that kind of style. It's, you know, it reminded me of that kind of folky horror. Not necessarily 70s stuff like Don't Look Now or The Wicker Man, but it's that kind of vibe, isn't it? But more modern, I guess.
Yeah.
So yeah, Definitely. 3 stars for me.
For me, it's not 5 stars because I've only got 4 claws, but 4 for me, 4.
4 claw.
It gets 4 claws Four fingers from Freddie.
Don't forget to like and subscribe. We'll see you on the next one. Bye from Freddie and Cabbage Patch Creepy Doll.